Chapter 66. Maxwell sighed from behind his desk. "Boy, you better be careful, getting entangled with the daughter of that warlock. I already heard about the stunt you pulled during that elite party at the president's mansion. If you continue to act like that before you have the power to support your recklessness, then you'll be killed sooner rather than later." That old man was being a bitter asshole, so he deserved a bit of pushback. I agree, but believe me when I tell you that I know better than anyone how malicious nobles can be. They are a group founded upon generations of constant supremacy, and in the last 2 centuries they've never been able to be challenged by anyone except the church. There are extremely few cases where someone is able to do what you do and use a relationship to stick a hand into that circle. Just that is enough to warrant unsavory attention, but if you go out of your way to actively challenge their authority, they'll gladly take the chance to stick a blade against your neck. "Yay?" I sighed with a nod. I understood that just being Umar's boyfriend was dangerous, and that testing the tolerance of those snobby nobles was asking to be killed. The wonderful world of nobility was even darker than the black market, mainly because the darkness of the black market was created by them in the first place, even if only through their demand for it. I was under no illusions that those godlike people didn't have a hand in everything that went on in their kingdom, good and bad. The influence they wielded should never be disregarded. But even knowing all of that, I still didn't care. I spoke my thoughts. Right now, they think I'm just an idiot who doesn't know what he's dealing with. They won't do anything to me yet. The parents won't, but the children will. Let them try. Ravana is lucky I didn't shatter the right side of his skull. He'll think twice before testing me again. And besides, I have more experience fighting people than scourge beasts. There isn't a single student at the magisterium I couldn't kill. Perhaps it's true. But don't walk down the path of no return. If you keep pushing, they will find an excuse. So if you don't want to live the rest of your life hiding inside that fancy hotel room of yours, then learn to either bear with the harassment or avoid it. I didn't respond. Although I understood that, I didn't like it at all. Until I had the power to face them on equal grounds, or at least survive any underhanded machinations they sent my way, I couldn't be so brazen. Suddenly, I had a thought. Tapping my aerial, I activated the rudimentary browser and searched for the Black Spider repository. From there I searched the bounties before finding my name. And perhaps unsurprisingly, my bounty increased. From a measly 40 to a clean 100,000 coin, over double the previous amount. There were also a few more details on me and my whereabouts. It seems some people had decided that my existence was annoying, so they were contributing more to take me out. First it was only those from the trenches, but now, it seemed that my notoriety was rapidly spreading through the noble circles. There would be more eager hunters, and ones not so easy to deal with. Perhaps that hunter who attacked during my date with Vedsman had jumped at the opportunity, hoping I was an easy target. And he would only be the first of many. The details under my name said that I was Authority 5 as well, so I would be getting hunted by those at or above that caliber. There was a very real threat to my life, not that there ever hadn't been. I would need to start taking more precautions, even when around my friends. And I had a feeling that Oro would be my most important lifeline. No different than a radar for hostiles, it would be a crucial source of immediate information. My breath was long as I pondered the future. But soon enough the entire Polaris headquarters was interrupted by the presence of a rather esteemed but unannounced guest. I could feel her presence before she even arrived. Maxwell was more perceptive than I was, and together, we left the room as we heard a commotion outside. A dozen guards had responded as Duchess Hilaria stormed into the compound. And at the helm was someone I had never seen before, yet someone who very obviously held a high status. Or, I should say the highest status. I quickly recognized her from one of the bounties on the repository. The head of the Polaris family, Luna, an authority 10+ warlock. She was a woman with bright platinum hair. The evening moon seemed to highlight her gorgeous locks like a spotlight, perhaps the origin of her name. And she wore a gentle set of white and blue robes held up by a thick sash. Her hair was bundled up around the collar of her robes, and together with her button nose, she was shockingly cute for a woman who should be rather old. But her regal was even above that of the Duchess. She stood before her as an equal, yet the grace by which she carried herself made it seem like she held dignity well above the other. One looked too high to be touched or challenged, while the other didn't give a damn. The Duchess also wasn't in the mood for delays, so she came with a certain level of hostility. Thankfully we had appeared before any of those hostilities could be exchanged. When the Duchess saw me, the direction of her gaze also attracted the Polaris head, both of their gazes landing on Maxwell and I. The Duchess jumped, her figure bounding over the heads of everyone present and landing before me. That's when her gaze flickered and shot past me, sensing the fluctuations in the nearby room. So she walked past me too, entering Maxwell's study with hurried steps. The three of us followed and entered the room. Maxwell sighed as he did so, and I could clearly sense the head on my heels. Everyone's sight landed on Umara in the chair, and an audible sigh could be heard. It seemed that after finally getting a read on her condition, the Duchess was okay. Then, she looked at Maxwell, her first words being spoken. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter, Sir Albarrane." John didn't give me much of a choice after he came barging through my door. But rest assured my tools are top quality. Yes, I noticed. She nodded before turning her gaze to me. "Thank you as well, for your quick thinking, though I'm not sure how I feel about you being with my daughter this late into the night. I was just helping her train. I didn't even know anything about enlightenment either. I thought it was an advancement, so I brought her to the only place I could think of. Well, it's certainly an unpredictable event. I will ask her about it afterward. But for now I have no more worries. Lady Luna, I apologize for my intrusion." The Duchess turned back around, facing Luna in the doorway. She stood there with a smile on her face, undisturbed by the sudden events. "It's of no consequence. I suppose I should congratulate you instead on your daughter's enlightenment. At this age, she's no less than a prodigy to achieve such a feat. Truly a surprise to reward. Not that I don't believe in my daughter's talent, but even I didn't expect anything like this to happen, not for a long while. Nonetheless, thank you for your hospitality. Of course. Please enjoy your stay. And? You're John, correct?" Luna suddenly turned her focus to me, but it wasn't like I didn't expect some attention, so I just responded normally. "Yes. Pleasure to meet you, Lady Luna. I've heard a lot about you. I imagine your tutelage underneath the esteemed Maxwell Albarrane has been more than fruitful." "Yes, it has. I thank you for the opportunity back then to receive his teachings when I was just an upcoming summoner. Well, Tavera had been merely fulfilling one of my old requests to provide me with a talented but new summoner. I had started to believe that he would just ignore it for another year, but then you came along and impressed him. Who would have thought that you'd grown into such notoriety so quickly? Even I have heard of the American bringing just havoc to the trenches." "Yeah, I was only trying to stay alive." I just chuckled as she looked me up and down. Once she seemed satisfied, she nodded to all those present, giving a goodbye before seeing herself out. The Duchess took a nearby seat with a sigh, crossing her legs while watching her daughter. She obviously didn't plan on going anywhere. And since that was the only seat besides the one behind the desk, I sat against a wall. I didn't plan on leaving either. Maxwell looked at both of us before shooting me a glare and sitting behind his desk. And so all three of us sat in silence. I did some work on my advancement formation since I was waiting anyway. But after another hour passed, we all felt some changes. Umara groaned while all the nearby magicka started getting sucked into her body. "Dear, can you hear me? Mom? Expel your mana. Quickly." The Duchess tried to help her, and Umara seemed to gain enough of her mental faculties back to listen. She started wielding her mana and casting several spells all at once. All of them were air spells, and I started to notice various effects. At first I heard some vibrations, like a low resonance frequency similar to bass. Then I heard nothing at all as the ground started to shake, bookshelves being rattled. It was the spell I had inspired her to create. Even the Duchess was surprised by its effects. However, after some time, even the ground shaking stopped. Yet, the spells that were releasing a constant low frequency were still active. My eyes widened. There was a new spell being cast, and however it worked, it cancelled out sounds entirely without releasing any of the energy into something like the ground. Speaking of noise cancellation, I couldn't help but remember some modern technology. I remembered a term called destructive interference, whereby one noise would combine with another and cancel each other out. I didn't know the specifics, but if that was what Umara was doing, then I would be incredibly impressed. I had mentioned something along those lines but didn't get into it much when I was teaching her. Most of my knowledge was basic, like how sound wasn't just a vibration but a wave of pressure traveling through a medium. It had highs and lows, frequencies and amplitudes, even if we couldn't perceive them. But it wasn't like I had a PhD in physics or acoustics. I taught her a lot, even things that seemed completely unrelated to sound. I just wanted to get my knowledge out. But it seemed that in her efforts to translate that knowledge into magical insights, she had discovered more than I knew. Warlocks probably understood scientific concepts intimately. I wouldn't be surprised if there were warlocks out there who could turn lead into gold because they knew all about the fundamental forces, atomic configurations, fission and fusion. But that didn't mean they could put it into words, which was why technology in this world was still lacking advancement. It would take summoners to study science and realize that more could be achieved without magic in order to take this world further. And I was sure once they did, they could even surpass Earth, and quicker at that. Magic was too useful. If Earth suddenly gained magic, then the already exponential technological growth would increase by another magnitude. We would probably be colonizing planets not long after, maybe even terraforming them given a few decades to get used to the changes. But even disregarding the technology, as proven by Umara, science could help warlocks understand their magic, or their elements, in different ways. It would help them directly, not just in making spells, but by increasing their understanding of the element and making them stronger. For them, knowledge was power. Except, all their knowledge came in the form of feelings instead of hard math. It also meant that my modern knowledge was far more valuable than I thought. If I could spread scientific knowledge to the entire kingdom, then the entire warlock class would jump in strength. That meant that humanity's combat power as a whole would increase by a significant percentage. Enlightenments, which were considered rare, may become merely uncommon, perhaps even a standard. And as my girlfriend, Umara would benefit the most. She would no doubt hound me for more knowledge later, and I wouldn't hesitate to oblige her. Even disregarding our relationship, she was a battle partner, someone who I would trust my back to, someone who stood by my side under siege. The more powerful she was, the safer I would be. Not only that, but I was curious to see how far she could take my knowledge. I was also eager to spill my knowledge anyway. After all, The information in my head brought over from a modern Earth was what set me apart from everyone else on this planet. Perhaps it was a bit childish of me, but it made me feel special. Especially when Umara was able to understand it. Whenever she was able to grasp the concepts, I felt like a new bridge was built between us that could close the gap in our relationship. A gap that was no doubt created by my own psyche. In the back of my head, I was always aware that everyone around me was naive to many of the things that I took as common sense. While humans had always understood the world around them through instinct, it was our academia that brought us far beyond the animals which could do the same. This world hadn't even had an industrial revolution, and at the rate it was going, it would take another couple centuries for it to begin one. Even then, it was advancing more in the magical sector than the science sector. While I understood that magic could do a lot, I was inclined to believe that science could do even more. A magical revolution? Was that even possible for them? Unlocking magical abilities required a powerful caster, so they would always be stuck behind a wall unless the few Authority 12 warlocks were able to enable the rest of their lessers to break past it with some esoteric practices. Even then, it wasn't like they could just pass their abilities down. There was only one thing I could think of that might trigger a magical revolution similar to an industrial revolution. Enchanting. Take my Ariel as an example. Magic could be programmed to do complex tasks just like a computer. San was already creating a magic internet, but I had yet to see any factories full of automated machines. I felt like he was skipping a few steps, but it wasn't like he could be blamed for nobody else innovating like he was. Or perhaps I was just ignorant and there was much more going on than I was privy to being a mere consumer. Nevertheless, if enchanting was a craft that didn't rely on the authority of a warlock, but their knowledge and ability to create magical software, then it was possible that I had been brought to this world right as it was beginning something similar to an industrial revolution, but for magic. The only issue was resources. Every enchantment had to be run by a crystal, which could only be sourced from killing scourge beasts and purifying their black crystals. Their only advantage was how white crystals seemed to be an infinite source of magical power, at least from the little I've seen. It passively recovered its magicka without any input, something that defied all laws of physics. It simply generated energy out of nothing, or at least, nothing that we could perceive. And whatever its source of energy was, it seemed infinite as well. But even with that advantage, crystal supplies were incredibly limited and paid for in human lives. Even the least powerful ones were expensive, let alone anything above that. So unlike machines that could be built with the seemingly limitless supplies of metals from the ground, enchanted devices would always remain in short supply and would never be allowed to exceed a certain scale, no matter how amazing the field of enchanting became. So even a magical revolution was likely to only affect the noble class, whereas the commoners would see little to none of its benefits. Unless there was a way to create crystals. Scourge beasts grew them in their bodies. Who was to say that such a process couldn't be artificially replicated? And if it was, would this world create an infinite source of infinite power sources? If that happened, then the magical revolution might cause seismic shifts far more drastic than the industrial revolution on Earth. More food for thought. Chapter 67. Umara's advancement lasted several hours, through which she received tempering on the level of my own. It seemed that whatever tempering she had gone through before with her mother wasn't an actual tempering. In fact, her tempering was only prompted by her enlightenment. Did warlocks need to enlighten themselves to receive the tempering? I thought of this question and decided to ask the Duchess, since she definitely knew about it. The answer was a surprising affirmative. To achieve a beyond perfection understanding of one's element will earn a warlock the right to open themselves to greater power, which we take advantage of through the tempering process. However, and enlightenment can only be achieved after one has cultivated a perfect elemental affinity through advancing their authorities. Ah! There was the limitation. Enlightenments couldn't be received back to back. The only reason Umara was able to get enlightened this time was because she already had a perfect affinity for air, something that had taken her 3 authorities to cultivate. She wouldn't be able to do so for fire, her next element, until after her advancement to Authority 7. But my knowledge would still ensure that she would have perfect advancements and achieve a perfect affinity in the first place. After a bit more discussion with the Duchess, I learned that the reason advancements became more difficult through higher authorities was because cultivating multiple affinities actually worked against the warlock. According to her, cultivating one element filled the world around them with a fog that was the elemental energy of mana. At first it was dim, becoming thicker until it became a perfectly precise but ever-present nebula. And, although it was precise, it still got in the way of clearly seeing the other elements. It was like putting multiple veils in front of your eyes and being expected to make out the sights in front of you. The more veils, the harder it was, even if the veils became clearer to you in the process. To cultivate the 4th element was the most difficult thing a warlock could do, as they would have to see through 3 veils at all, but made their final element imperceptible. In fact, it was said that the barrier to the 10th authority was harder to surpass than the barrier to the 11th, as the 10th authority required one to glimpse a dim, barely perceptible fog behind the veils that already made it close to impossible to see anything behind them to begin with. At least an Authority 11 could see a fog at all if they made it to that level. However, there was one respite that increased the chances of one being able to start cultivating their final element. One thing that made it a tiny bit easier. Enlightenments. To achieve a beyond perfect understanding of an element would also make the veil it created not as blurring. Instead of seeing something that blocked the view of the rest of the world, an enlightenment would change their view into something that was a part of the world, not atop it. They would see the element as it was in nature, not as some magical fog all around them. This made it so that their view wouldn't be blocked and they would be able to glimpse the new fogs of other elements with greater ease. However, enlightenments weren't easy. A talented warlock was lucky to be enlightened once, let alone twice or 3 times. What Umara did with my knowledge made her nothing short of a genius that couldn't be described by the elite status she had earned at the Magisterium. Even her own mother hadn't expected this to happen for a long while, and she knew her best. The two were almost twins. But beyond the first enlightenment, the addition of other elements made a subsequent enlightenment much harder. That was because it required not just the understanding of the second element, but required them to reconcile their knowledge with the first as well. Basically, they had to achieve beyond perfect understandings of both and then figure out how they connected to each other, elevating both to the same level. The difficulty didn't simply add, it multiplied. But Umara's chances of doing so as the daughter of the Duchess, who inherited the talent of her mother, was already high enough to begin with. There was little doubt about her reaching Authority 10, and to do so would require an enlightenment or 2 to begin with. And now, with her having completed the first so early and now getting access to my knowledge, her chances were even higher. Dare I say, if we took this far enough, she would surpass her mother. While I didn't know about my own chances to reach such a level, Umara's talent was already apparent, and inheriting talent from parents was already a known and regular phenomenon. It was why the noble class was such a tight-knit circle. They were able to pop out generations of powerful warriors with certainty so long as certain practices were maintained. So even if I didn't reach that level, Umara would be able to rise above me so long as I was able to feed her the knowledge. And with my growing smarts and memory that was being perfected with every advancement, my ability to do so was rapidly solidifying. So long as our relationship continued down a positive path, There was no reason why I wouldn't empower my partner. I thought of all this as Umar began to finish her advancement. By the time she was doing so, it was early morning. I looked at her drowsily as she began to groan and calm down. My previous advancement and tempering ended with me having an energized mind that forced me back awake. But for her, it seemed that, although she was bursting with power, her mind had been drained of all its energy. Not only that, but she ended up covering her eyes, complaining about oversensitivity. It seemed that whatever enhanced awareness of her element she gained was overloading her, not to mention being empowered with psyche and vigor. Her mind must feel like it was running 1,000 miles per hour right now. And the Duchess understood her plight. She scooped up her daughter in a princess carry, which was comfortable enough to cause Umar to pass out, and gave me a deep look. Once again, I thank you, John. To have missed out on her tempering would have been a rather disastrous disadvantage for her future. You have my gratitude. I'm her boyfriend, so it's a given. If she is to fight beside me in the future, I want nothing more than to be confident in her strength. Her power is my happiness. I'm glad. Not only that you would fight for her but that you seek to empower her so she can fight for herself. I am more confident in your relationship so long as you continue to display the necessary talent. If you can't keep up, then your chances to pursue her are automatically reduced to nothing. I understand. It stung a little, but I knew that was the reality. My being a commoner was already enough to cause discord, not to mention how I'm also a cold summoner, the weakest Magus there is in this world. If I were also talentless, then there would come a day where I would simply be killed for overstepping, let alone if I were also being rebellious like I recently had been. All the cards were stacked against me, and there was yet another reason for me to focus on getting stronger. I couldn't let my girlfriend leave me behind. How was I supposed to protect her then? But I was still confident in myself. I was already punching well above my class and I had Maxwell to back me up. The road ahead would be trying, but I was never one to back away from a challenge or risk. Quite the opposite. So you know, I am already receiving pressure from several noble families whose suitors are demanding I rid Umar of your presence. She has yet to know of this pressure since I wanted her to focus on her advancement, but now that it's over, she will be forced to deal with this. That's her responsibility since she pursued you. Just like you must meet the standard, she must also weather the consequences of her actions. Be prepared, because as her boyfriend, you will be dragged into it. I'll take it as it comes. And she will have my full support. Millimeters, I at least know that you aren't a coward. She nodded and turned, leaving the study. I felt nice getting a compliment like that, smiling through my exhaustion as she disappeared from view. I heard a groan not long after, hearing Maxwell rise from his desk. I'm too old for this. Get out of here so I can finally go to sleep. Sure thing. Thank you, also. You saved my ass. I expressed my heartfelt thanks as he grumbled his way to the door. I know. But you should be thankful that Duchess Teleria is reasonable and well-mannered. She seems very open to your presence. Any normal noble, especially on that level, would have simply forbid you from so much as speaking to their child, let alone fornicate. We haven't fornicated. But yea, I seem to have struck gold. And it'll be the catalyst for your rise or the harbinger of your downfall. Play your cards well, John, and be diligent. Fail, and your little boat will be overturned by the wrath of the ocean as it feeds you to its behemoths. Or kill the behemoths. You don't need to kill them to beat them. You just have to refuse to die. So hurry up and get better. I'm giving you until the end of your time with the Magisterium to advance to Authority 5. That is around 7 months from now. After that, you'll be released into treacherous waters, but by then, you should be capable of at least weathering some storms. He dispensed wisdom while leaving the study. Beyond that, he didn't say anything else, waving me off so he could get his beauty sleep. I left as well. Still, I wondered about Amara. If the Duchess was made aware of my knowledge and understood that it could actually enhance the knowledge of a warlock, would she seek to take it? Would I have to write her a bunch of science textbooks? I would have to be a bit more careful from now on. That, or duck under the wing of Sun Industries faster than I intended. So do you want to tell me what happened? Amara hummed as she stuffed her face full of food. She was starting to realize why John always ate so much. If his body was enhanced like this, it was no wonder he needed so much fuel. Still, she felt better than she ever had. She could see how John had managed to perform so well just after advancing once. Sure, she couldn't use Vigor or Psyche, but it still gave her benefits. Small benefits, but for her who had nothing before, it felt like a transformation. After satiating the worst of her hunger, Amara glanced at her mother, who sat at the side of her bed patiently. Neither she nor her mother were stupid. She shouldn't have been enlightened this fast, and the only outlier was John. She had already spoken of his esoteric knowledge before, and now, Amara understood that it was far more valuable than she initially realized. It gave her an entirely new understanding of the world around her and became the catalyst for a beyond perfect understanding of her element. It was revolutionary knowledge that could affect the entire warlock class, and if she wasn't careful, she would put John in a bad position. And both of them already had a lot on their plate. But she trusted her mother. Trusted her enough not to chain John up and force him to spill all his knowledge. At the same time though, she decided that in this moment, she had the advantage. Duchess Hilaria was as shrewd as she was direct. Not just anyone could run the second most economically successful city in the kingdom without having profound business acumen, even if they had a whole host of advisors to help them. But she struck a balance between the economics and the militarization of resources. As the commanding power of the warlock corps, she naturally knew how to demand certain things of certain people, how to simply supersede the negotiation table without degrading or devaluing the person in front of her. And Amara, as the firstborn daughter and someone who inherited her mother's psyche, had learned about all of this extensively. Her own acumen was rarely used since she was biding her time at the magisterium. But that didn't mean she didn't understand how to take advantage of the things she had. So for the first time in a while, she started to scheme ahead. While eating food, of course. Remember when I spoke to you about John's weird knowledge? After your return from your first trip, yes. Well, he was telling me about some things, seeing if it would help me make some better spells. He had to explain it with some examples and a lot of flailing arms, but he got the point across, and before I knew it, I figured out another way to cancel out sound. How? By simply redirecting it into the ground. She raised her hand, knocking on the wood of her bed frame. Sound is a vibration, and vibrations deliver force onto all tangible objects. When it vibrates the air, we hear sound. When it vibrates something solid like wood, it simply sends the force through the object. Same with a liquid. *ting. She tapped a glass cup with her fingernail, causing the water within to vibrate. The fluctuations of the water are merely visualizations of sound. So, using all this knowledge, I figured out how to simply redirect the vibrations in the air into the ground. There, it would simply dissipate into the world, never to be heard by any living creature beyond or within the field I created. Even John said that he couldn't hear his own voice, though he still felt the vibrations caused by the yelling in his throat. That is certainly interesting. The Duchess leaned back, pondering her words. Redirecting vibrations. The only issue I can see with it is how the ground doesn't absorb all of the vibrations. Like when you tapped your bed frame, we still heard sound. The wood obviously just sent out more sound. But the ground does absorb sound. My not creating sounds was simply a release of energy caused by the impact, which also caused vibrations. The vibrating wood created vibrating air, which created sound. But if I force the sound into the rigid object, all that energy will be dispersed into it and anything around it, eliminating sound. Especially the ground, which can absorb limitless sound. The Duchess leaned back and thought while Amara began to come to her own understanding. She was beginning to realize how John felt while explaining all of this to her. She believed in his words and didn't have a hard time accepting it, especially how there were plenty of mysterious things about him anyway. Some knowledge about the world around them wasn't all that difficult to wrap her head around. But warlocks didn't understand the world around them in words. They understood it by their feelings. Just sitting there she could feel all the sounds and movements of air around them. She recognized the oscillating waves that collided with her window, meaning there were sounds coming from the outside. Even the breath of her mother caused sound waves to form. Some of the energy she released became movement, or as John called it, kinetic energy, while everything else turned into vibrations that propagated through the air around them. Through her enlightenment, she was able to rectify John's knowledge with everything she felt. But the only reason she found those feelings in the first place was because of his education. And her mother had gone through an enlightenment for her air element as well. She knew more than herself. But even then, she still had a hard time understanding what was being said. It went to show how wide the gap was between the science and a warlock's personal understanding. Amara scratched her head. She didn't know everything that John did. He obviously had a much deeper understanding of everything himself, so she wouldn't be able to explain it like he did. She had learned about all different types of energy and those associated with acoustics and gases. But she didn't quite know why everything was that way. For now, she was simply believing in him blindly, mainly because she had verified it in her own special way as well. All right, think of this. Amara went back to trying to explain. She even explained the theories behind her noise cancellation, not just redirection. And it was only after some time that her mother started to understand. She could already do all of this with her spells, far more than Amara could, but only now was she finally starting to describe it in regular human terms. And Amara did her best to make her understand not just the knowledge, but how valuable it was. Couldn't sell something unless the other party knew just how much it was worth. And over time, her mother did in fact come to realize this. After all, it had resulted in her own enlightenment. But it didn't seem like she was entirely convinced. I understand what you're trying to say, dear. But I don't believe even you entirely know what you're talking about. No, not entirely. John does, though even he says that what he knows only scratches the surface. But I do know that his knowledge can help the entire warlock class. It's a new way to comprehend the elements. Maybe. The Duchess only nodded. Amara could tell that she still didn't understand what she was saying. So she sighed and gave up. For now. John being valuable beyond his own power would mean that they could garner more support, especially from the Duchess. Amara didn't forget how she had done nothing to back either of them up at the party, and that was intentional. She knew her mother wouldn't cuddle her, and now that she had advanced, she would be facing the pressure of other nobles who didn't approve of her relationship with John. So she needed to give her a reason to support them. She hoped this would be one of those things. And perhaps she would have to prove the worth of her knowledge using herself. That would take time, so she didn't press the issue for now. Finishing the last of her food, she rose from her bed and left the room with her mother. The two went straight to a study within their mansion, which Umara had been returned to when she was unconscious. And inside they found Duke Talaria, Umara's father. Ikor. Oh, Talexia. And my authority-5 daughter. How are you feeling? Ikor stood, revealing his burly figure from behind a mahogany desk holding stacks of papers. Umara gave him a hug when he stepped out from behind it. Her father was an authority 10 knight and had muscles like steel. He was also completely riddled with scars, trophies from his years of military service. Rugged yet smart and wise. I'm feeling great. That's good. I heard that you underwent a proper tempering during your enlightenment. How are your reflexes? Umara jolted when she saw her father flicker, shooting toward her with blinding speed. She was barely able to keep up, raising a hand and instinctually casting a spell. The air in front of her was compressed, meeting his outstretched palm and exploding. His palm stopped in its tracks only 2 feet in front of her face, while the air was kicked up like a hurricane all around them, several books flying out of their bookshelves and dusty corners wisping out of their coves. Ikor smiled. Very good. With Psyche, your mind will operate faster. And with vigor, your body will be able to keep up with your mind. Of course, these things will forever remain a mere supplement to your magic, another tool for survival. Keep up your training. I will. Umara smiled, shaking her stinging hand. Her father's palm was an unbreakable wall, so the compressed air which was supposed to stop it had rebounded and hit her own. Still, even she was surprised about her own ability to cast that spell. And there was one detail, or lack of it, that indicated her enlightenment. The lack of a proper spell. When a warlock cast a spell, they wrote the formation into the world and activated it. But she didn't have to for air spells now after achieving a beyond perfect understanding. In fact, air spells in general were now far more powerful as well as far less costly. There was a reason enlightenments were such a big deal. They boosted a warlock's combat ability by several times. Umara, despite having just advanced to Authority 5, was now on the level of a late Authority 5 warlock, if not an Authority 6. She was already able to fight above her own level, just like John did. And in time, she would grow into her new power, widening the gap between her and those of her level. When her father pat her on the shoulder and squeezed, she chuckled and fought his vice grip, the two walking out of the study. The Duchess followed them with a smile. They descended the mansion stairs, entering another room where a young girl was studying beside a tutor. Seeing her family, she took the chance and ditched the book in front of her. Papa. Look at you. Eager to study, eh? I don't like books. I like training the spear with you. Well, you still have some time before you finally awaken. Training can only do so much before then. I know. Study hard so that I can enter the magisterium. She set herself back down cuddly, seeing how she wasn't going to be training today. Umara went over and ruffled her thick brown hair. Fatalaria was 14 years old and had thick brown hair like her father. But she inherited the sharp face of her mother like Umara did, giving her a fierce look. Other than that, she had the disposition of her father. And according to the crest that looked like a mess of vertical lines across the back of her hand, she was already determined to be a future knight, inheriting the talent of her father. She would activate her crest in 2 years and then enter the magisterium. Before then, she had to learn enough to get in the conventional way. Seeing that crest, Umara remembered John's 13-star crest. She had been told that he hadn't even been cultivating his authorities for a year yet, unlike them who had taken 4 years to get to their current level. He had been advancing on a monthly basis for 3 authorities. She wondered about the circumstances around that. He told her that he came to the capital from a village. But he hadn't actually lived there. He had lived in that place called Earth. But then why hadn't he activated his crest earlier? Why had he taken so long to start cultivating his authorities? And how did he do it so fast? She got curious. There were too many things she wanted to find out about him. Chapter 68. After the Duchess whisked my girlfriend away, she didn't return for the next 2 days. And since I was suspended, I had nothing to do with the magisterium and didn't have much to do. So in the meantime, I spent most of my day working on the new advancement formation and searching through my dimension for any cool weapons. I didn't find any, mainly because higher dimensions were deeper and much more difficult to search unless my psyche became powerful enough to project further into it. So it would take time to scour and find new or exotic weapons within. But I couldn't stay cooped up in my room all day, so since I had free time, I decided to take on some jobs. Of course, when Plex heard that I wanted some work, he sent me straight to the trenches, the petty bastard. So I had my work cut out for me, but it wasn't like the money wasn't good, so I didn't complain that much. My weapons were also better, so I had a much easier time. The only thing that could pull me away from those two things was when a friend wanted to hang out. Fiden often talked to me and invited me out, and Vetsman would usually tag along. Speaking of the big guy, Vetsman seemed to have come to terms with what I did after a day or two of thought. At the very least, we were able to interact normally. He didn't seem to have any issues with it, or maybe just not an issue with me doing it. He might not like it, but it wasn't like I could just tell all those after my head to leave me alone. Besides, the big lug was constantly worried about courting Tana. Sure enough, she was denser than lead. Vetsman had actually managed to plan a date, but she didn't take it as a date at all from what he told me. I wished him luck in his endeavors. 10 days of no school was nice, besides the fact that I didn't get to practice any scenarios. While I didn't technically need it, my squad was supposed to be working on our coordination. 10 days worth of scenarios and hunting was a lot to miss out on. The puppet master worked around it, I heard. Scenarios like protecting a stationary target from an onslaught seemed to be the favorite right now. He wanted them to know how to protect me, the most fragile person in the squad, so that's all they worked on. Well, it wasn't like I didn't get practice in the trenches, so I wasn't that worried. The day before we were supposed to leave for the next trip was the end of my suspension, so I just waited until then. Besides the occasional scare from an unwelcome hunter, my life for that week and a half was uneventful. Even when Umara came back, our time together was largely spent talking about science. I was right. She wanted to know everything I did. It was good that my memory was becoming better. I could remember the science and math better from all of my high school and college classes. Those days of slogging through chemistry, physics, and engineering work for my degree was actually being utilized, albeit only conceptually. All the math like calculus was close to worthless for Umara. But since she only needed conceptual knowledge, all those thousands of hours I'd spent looking through articles about obscure scientific topics I found interesting on the internet or in videos came in really handy. Falling down those rabbit holes of intellectual curiosity was too easy, much to the dismay of my sleep schedule back then. So I was armed with a wide array of knowledge about dozens of topics that might help her. The only hard part was remembering specific details, which my strong mind was helping with. Otherwise I'd be screwed. So I didn't know everything, but I did know plenty to help Umara. Right now, her biggest focus was everything related to the fire element, or in other words, thermal energy, plasma, and combustion. It was a good thing that I found joy in spilling all this knowledge, yet sometimes it could still be a bit of a chore. Mainly because I had to explain the most basic scientific concepts about the world around us for her to begin understanding the more complex ones, which took hours. At least she knew how to reward me for all the hard work. Those hours late into the night were always fun. 3 days before leave. As per our discussion from the night before, Umara and I went out shopping. Not to prepare for the upcoming trip, but to buy an essential item. So long as I wore my coat properly, it would protect everything from my neck down to my shins. So the only vulnerable parts of my body were my feet and head. I had tough boots and in general, my feet weren't much of a concern, though Umara still insisted that I buy another pair. So I bought a jet black pair of combat boots. They were shockingly comfortable, completely immune to the elements, slightly temperature regulated, had some features to enhance grip on all kinds of surfaces, and most importantly, durable. The leather it was made out of was known for its durability without sacrificing flexibility. It was made in such a way that I could maneuver and run all I wanted, yet was rigid enough to survive the crushing attacks from an authority-8 beast, preventing my lower legs from becoming paste. And if I encountered something stronger than that, I would have bigger problems than protecting my feet. Those boots cost me 170,000 coin, taking another chunk out of my savings. I didn't actually believe I needed such good boots, but Umara insisted that I get them. And she insisted pretty hard, which had me a bit confused. She didn't want me to save money on them, going for something rather overkill. And I agreed that I needed to keep myself safe, but her attitude toward it threw me off a bit. Like she was planning something. I threw that to the back of my mind as we arrived at another shop. It was a place that specialized in helmets and hats to protect the head, something I needed right now. But there were a few issues I had with anything that covered my head. For one, it could reduce my field of view. That was significantly detrimental to my ability to shoot and maintain awareness. But apparently, that was only an issue with cheaper helmets. Most helmets beyond a certain price point had features to fix that problem. After all, knights couldn't get tunnel vision either. With that in mind, we entered the store and immediately saw several items on display. I looked between several shelves, but I didn't find anything that looked familiar. There were hats similar to bowler hats, even top hats. But the selection of hats in general was rather slim. I could imagine why. Protecting the head was nothing to be half-assed with, and fabric or leather hats simply didn't offer good protection against claws, crushing, or projectiles. Or, it didn't seem like there were many hats that were built with that in mind. Welcome, Sir and Mrs. How can I assist you today? We're looking for a head protection. For a summoner. A summoner? I see. The clerk seemed a bit surprised but ran with it anyway. I could imagine they didn't get many summoners in general. Well, a piece for a summoner immediately narrows down the selection. Come, let me show you. He waved us along, the two of us following to the back of the store where he showed off a single shelf with some mannequin heads wearing various pieces of headgear. Knights have heads hard enough to wear solid metal helmets. But put a summoner inside the same helmet, and his brain would be turned to soup with a single blow. For warlocks, and summoners, we choose to utilize softer means of protection. We do in fact have rigid headgear with pure impact reduction in mind, but at the higher price range, we offer hybrid pieces that are rigid yet flexible, mitigating impacts like a helmet without delivering it all to the head inside. This piece right here is one of our best. He grabbed a head with a hood on it. It certainly was flexible like a fabric, but I could also tell from the way he moved it that it didn't simply bend when told to. Seeing that Umara was interested, he described it. This hood protects everything except the face. We offer pieces that are meant to be paired with this hood, like a mask. As you can imagine, different pieces need to be built in different ways. Anyway, the hood is capable of mitigating the impact of a piercing arrow shot by an authority 5 knight and preventing all trauma to the head. That might not seem like much, but you have to keep in mind the piercing aspect. If it's a blunt object, like a rock or a bludgeoning blow from a scourge beast, then this can mitigate far more, up to a 37. What do you think of a hood? Umara suddenly asked me, making me ponder. Besides the fact that it needs a mask, it seems good. Better than a metal can. Don't you have that one air mask? How good is it? Not sure. I brought out the air mask, showing it to the clerk. This thing gives the wearer greater stamina and filters air. Ah, I've seen similar functions. But this mask isn't built for much protection. The leather looks basic. Its value is in its enchantments and crystal. Alright. Would you be able to upgrade this mask? Keep the filtering and stamina properties but make it stronger. I could, but if you're looking to pair it with this hood, then it'll be a significant change. This only covers half the face, and you surely don't want to leave the rest of your face exposed. I can already see you've had some experience in that regard. Heh? I chuckled when he pointed out my scars. By now everything had healed over, but they still looked gnarly and were unmistakable. He inspected the mask a bit more before rubbing his chin. How about this? You buy the hood and I'll give you a discount on a custom-made mask. I'll strip this one for its materials and reuse them, giving you something similar to our masks but retaining the functions within this one. That sounds good. Very well. Come see our selection of masks. He brought us over to another shelf, showing some masks off. The ones that were meant to be worn with the hood were all semi-rigid. If hit with a projectile, it would focus on deflecting it using the curves of the face. So it was more rigid than the hood, but not on the level of a metal helmet. I pondered for a while before Umar tapped my shoulder. Keep looking and come over to the counter when you decide. I'm going to talk to the clerk. Why? About your hood. Just some of the details like the materials and fit. Or do you know about all the different types of materials? Fine. Heh? She chuckled and tiptoed, giving me a kiss on the cheek before working away with the clerk. I looked around a bit more before choosing one particular type of mask. It was one that integrated with the hood well yet didn't cover anything above the cheeks. It was more flush against the face and protected 2/3 of the face instead of just half. I chose it for less intrusiveness, keeping my field of view unobstructed. Besides, the hood would come down to just above my eyebrows anyway, so technically everything but a thin area for my eyes would be covered. There were full face coverings, but those were far more expensive due to the complex enchantments that retain sight through the mask. I didn't feel like paying that much. So after I chose the mask, I went back to the clerk where Umara seemed to have finished her discussion. I handed it to him. This one. Ah, good choice. Your partner also said that this hood would be worn with the coat you're wearing? That's right. Very well. It will be built to accommodate that. On top of all this, the two items will come stored in the form of a neckband for easy deployment. Now, if you don't mind holding still for a moment. He spoke while waving his hand, a measurement spell appearing around my head and neck. Once he got those measurements it disappeared. Alright, with the mask, I have everything I need. Okay. So how much is the order? Doesn't matter. Umar answered for him, causing my brows to raise. What? Don't worry about the price. I'm paying. A moment, please. I grabbed my girlfriend and pulled her to the back room where we got some privacy. And I narrowed my eyes at her. What are you doing? I'm paying for this piece of gear. Look, you spent all that money on a suit because of me. And I don't want you spending any more. So I'm taking care of it. You know I can't let you do that. I can already tell this is going to come out to a few 100,000 coin. So just let me pay. No. Just as I turned to go back to the clerk, Umara grabbed my arm with a shockingly strong grip. It seemed her tempering brought her rather close to my own level of strength. She spoke in a dead serious tone. "You're letting me do this, John." "I'm not asking." "No, I'm not. I should be paying for myself, and I can, so I will." "Then consider this a gift from me, because you're not taking out a single coin. Think of it as repayment for the enlightenment you gave me. You would have done it yourself anyway. It's nothing to repay me for." "You're obviously not realizing how big of a deal an enlightenment is if you're saying that. But besides that, why are you so reluctant? You've already spent close to half of your savings. I just want to help you." She pulled me back toward her, looking me in the eye. I felt myself frowning, my mood darkening. Was I money insecure? No. I could spend money rather easily, mainly because I didn't spend it on stupid crap. If there was something I needed or wanted with good reason, I got it. But that didn't apply to others. If there was one thing I didn't like about my time in this world, it was all the charity I had to receive from everyone. I looked at Umar's concerned eyes and sighed. I can't take any more. I've already been given too much. It feels like I'm not doing anything for anyone else despite being taken care of so well. And now I finally have the money to at least take care of myself. So unless I have no choice, I won't ask anyone for help. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to take care of everything myself. I didn't realize you felt that way. So you're fine if you're the one that's going broke, but as soon as anyone else wants to help you, you get defensive. Look, John, allow me to explain what makes an enlightenment so valuable. She looked me in the eyes, not allowing room to refute. For one, enlightenments can't be paid for. And if they could be, my mother would spend hundreds of millions of coin if it meant I could get one, especially this early in my life. Yes, I would have gotten my enlightenment eventually, but it would have been within the next decade. What you've done has brought me incalculable benefits and advantages for the future. So buying a mere hood that might preserve the life of my boyfriend is a worthwhile exchange. To deny me this is an insult to my generosity. Do you understand that? I didn't respond, the two of us staring at each other and neither willing to stand down. I understood it, but I didn't like it. Yet another thing being given to me. A home at the nicest hotel in the city, given for free. A coat that saved my life more than once, given for free. The best summoner call and an entirely new advancement path capable of bringing me to heights never before seen by summoners, given for free. A job that allowed me to make substantial amounts of money and brought vast connections with people who have opened doors and given me opportunities for betterment, all for free. How much more did I have to take before I could finally start giving back? Or maybe it was just my pride getting in the way. Perhaps both points were valid. I closed my eyes, feeling the conflict within my mind and unwillingness to come to a conclusion. When I opened them, I didn't see Umara before me. Turning, I could hear her conversation with the clerk as she undoubtedly took care of the bill. How pathetic. I can't even get my own armor. I sighed and walked out. She wrapped up the sale as I did so, and soon, we left the store. She took my arm as we took to the streets of the Founders Market. We headed out and back toward the hotel. As we crossed the city, I bounced between ideas, rectifying the issue in my mind. And the conclusion I came to was that I needed to get better. If I didn't want to rely on others and instead help them, then I need to get better than I am now. I need to get to the level of all those who have supported me all this time if I wanted to give them the help I received. Whether it was making a lot more money than I ever have, or being able to utilize power far greater than I could currently imagine. It would take time, but damn if I got lazy while living on someone else's dime. Let's go train. I pulled Umara along, deciding that there was no time to waste. Chapter 69. Would you like to explain the recent expenditure? Umara heard her mother's voice over the aerial. It was a good thing she didn't decide to stay the night at John's place. She sat up in her bed, looking out the window and seeing the moon hanging over the city. It was a gift to John. A gift that cost 950,000 coin. It was a piece of headgear for him. You know he needs it. That's not the issue, dear. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt because I trust your judgment and know that you don't make such decisions without careful thought. So give me a good reason for the sudden loss of 1,000,000 coin. I'd like not to insult you by saying that your rationale has been completely clouded by your love for this boy. Umara frowned, thinking about her words before spitting them out. Mom, if you could purchase an enlightenment, how much would you spend for it? That's what this is about? You seem to be trying to sell me on the value of John's knowledge the other day. You think he actually directly caused your enlightenment? Yes. He gave me a new way, the correct way, to understand and view the world around me. Or do you believe that my talent is enough to have been enlightened so early in my life? Now it was her mother's turn to be silent. Admit that your daughter is far more talented than yourself, or that John's knowledge is that valuable. Umara inherited her mother's talent. It was possible that she was in fact more talented than her mother, but the chances were slim because she had reached every milestone about as quickly as her mother did. The Talaria family line was long and their talent consistent. They were a very combat-oriented family, as many were, and there was very little deviation from the normal timeline of a child's development. That was the reason all noble families were so tight-knit. They could go generations and constantly produce talented offspring, offering no room for another talented commoner to insert themselves into their ranks through sheer strength. Umara's enlightenment was an irregularity, and the only outlier in her life was John and his supposed knowledge. The Duchess sighed. I admit he may have played some part. But only the future can tell us if that really is the case. Well, one of those possibilities is correct. Either way, I see no issue with this purchase. So long as you don't push your luck. Pull another stunt like this, and you'll hear from your father next. I'll trust you. Don't give me a reason not to. I won't. Thank you, Mom. Millimeters. One more question. Does he know how much was spent? No. In fact, he was pissed that I was paying it all and I had to force it. If he knew I spent that much, I'm not actually sure how far he'd go to reject it. Fine. Click asterisk. The call ended, leaving Umara smiling. That meant her mother approved. For now, both of them were still in the green. The day of our leave approached. With my suspension over, I was able to return to Magisterium grounds. I didn't bother with checking in on classes and simply prepared for the trip. I went shopping with Umar beforehand and bought myself some more essentials. Primarily stuff for the inevitably crappy bed and other niceties that I found to be lacking at the last base. I made sure I had any and all medical supplies for myself. Changes of clothes in case I got bloody, and the new piece of armor we had picked up the day before. As little as I liked letting her pay for my own gear, I had to admit that it was gear that I needed. It also looked amazing. The surface was actually made of scales, but the scales were small, making it look like a solid material until you looked closer or bent it around. The inside also had a whole swath of enchanted lines, along with an implanted white crystal at the base of the skull. As for the mask, it integrated into the hood by wrapping around the bottom half of my face and neck, protecting everything but my eyes. And when it was stowed, it morphed and hung around my collar like a thick chain necklace. The mask retained its effects of filtering air and boosting my stamina. It was also replaced with black leather that, like the hood, matched my coat so it didn't look out of place. It was also just as durable as well. It was covered in tiny scales similar to the hood, and the air that came through went through imperceptible slits in the scales that minimized weak points. It was an amazing piece of work, which made me question just how much Umara actually spent. It shouldn't have been that much since it was only supposed to protect against blunt Authority 7 attacks, but the quality made me think otherwise. Well, she wouldn't tell me no matter how much I asked. I decided there wasn't anything I could do but use it and make sure she wouldn't regret the purchase. And so, the time to leave for our next trip arrived. I packed a chest and met with all of the fourth-year students at the gate. Like last time, there were plenty of carriages to take all of us to the terminal. I boarded one with my squad as the rest of the school waved us away. A quick trip to the terminal and we were on a rail headed for a place called the Nagaif Bastion. This place, unlike the last, was much closer to what would be considered the front lines. It supposedly faced constant battles and the level of beasts there was generally much higher. It wouldn't be a surprise to find Authority 7 beasts, maybe even Authority 8. That meant the soldiers stationed there were equally strong. The ride there took an entire day and went through 3 stops before arriving. And this time, we weren't the only passengers. The Magisterium was only allowed to take 2 cabins as the rest were filled with supplies or other soldiers. So we filled the cars with rows of seats. It felt like riding an airplane. But I was okay with being cramped with Umara. Fiden did the same with his girl. It seemed he and Mira were making some good progress. Mira was the daughter of a marquis like Fiden, so unlike Umara and I, their relationship was completely acceptable and encouraged. If time passed and they loved each other, I would be wishing him a happy life at his wedding sooner rather than later. As for Vetsman and Tana, well, the big guy was trying. I cheered him on from nearby as he tried to put the moves on Tana while they sat together. She looked like she was having fun, but it was difficult to watch knowing that everything was blowing right over her head. He was getting more comfortable though. Knowing that Tana wasn't really judging him, he was able to gradually come out of his comfort zone. Umara and I didn't talk much on the trip, just resting and sleeping in the comfort of each other's arms. And we arrived at the base with rested minds. "Welcome to the Nagaif Bastion," the puppet master shouted as soldiers crowded through the terminal around us, speaking through all the chatter. All the fourth-year students stood before him as luggage was unpacked. Soon, a major general, an Authority 8 officer, came to speak with us. It was the same as the last trip. He welcomed us, and since it was noon when we arrived, he went on to give us a tour. This base was much bigger than Calatrop base, at least triple the size. It had huge walls and several 2-story buildings just for housing, along with all the main buildings for logistics and commanding. The armory was massive. There was an entire field dedicated to holding a fleet of armored personnel carriers. And when we arrived, we could already hear the sounds of battle. Soldiers along the walls were operating magical cannons, while warlocks rained down hell from above. There were also knights securing the gates, occasionally launching their own attacks to soften the front lines of the enemy. There was much more activity here, especially since the population of soldiers was far bigger than Calatrop base. The Major General expressed his appreciation for our help, telling us how there was always work to be done. There were apparently 3 outposts several miles from this base, outposts that occasionally needed reinforcement. They suffered attacks often, so we would no doubt be going to help. The patrol missions were also frequent, as were extermination missions. Sometimes the patrol would spot groups of beasts, sending out the order for their extermination. All missions were done in at least 2 groups, and ones that involved scaled conflict would often be assigned a platoon of soldiers. Everything was much more dangerous, but at least for the elites with squads of authority 5 single quotes, it was nothing we couldn't handle within reason. If there was a chance to encounter something beyond our capabilities, we wouldn't be sent out without sufficient firepower. Once we finished the tour, we were let go to find our housing. And once I found our room, I was thankful to have bought the bedding that I did. Like the Caltrope base, each room could fit 2 people. But the room was about half the size and the beds weren't as large, enough to fit a man plus a bit of room to roll around in. There was at least enough room to fit our chests and store our stuff, but that was about it. I wasn't even sure if it was bigger than the kitchen in my hotel room. On top of that, in this 2-story housing complex, all the girls were right above us. It was rather noisy hearing all the footsteps above us, thankfully not enough to be too irritating. Fiden and I decided to group together again, unfortunately leaving Vetsman to fend for himself. In the end he managed to snag a room all to himself though, the lucky guy. When evening of our first day came, everyone seemed mostly situated. My squad had also taken a look at the walls and I found a few good vantage points for shooting should we come under siege. After that, we simply waited. Everyone knew that being on a military base involved nothing but boredom with short moments of excitement sprinkled in. It was just a game of hurry up and wait. The only thing I did on the second day was perch myself up on a tower and take shots at any surrounding beasts, getting a bit more practice with my Springfield. Also, I learned an interesting detail. Turns out, we wouldn't be at this base for the full month, only 3 weeks. The end of the year was approaching. Although I didn't often notice, it was in fact getting much colder outside. We would be released early for Christmas, which, unlike Earth, marked the end of the year and start of a new year. People would go to sleep on Christmas Eve and wake up on Christmas Day, celebrating the birth of Christ and the birth of a new year. It was the most popular holiday in this world. Every city would be celebrating it, especially the capital. I heard that the midnight countdown was rather bombastic. Well, it was at least nice to know that we would be here for 1 less week. But that also meant we would get more work. Sure enough, it was on the 3rd day that we got a mission. And not just us. 2 elite squads were being sent out. The first was ours, and the second. Perhaps they were even stronger than us. The 5 of us arrived at a large briefing room. Inside were several officers as well as the other squad. The squad of 5 sat at one of the tables behind the officers. We took another nearby. We eyed each other. I saw 2 people I recognized and 3 that I didn't. The 2 I saw were the rank 5 and 9 elites, a knight and warlock respectively. And Umara told me about the other 3, pressing up beside me with a whisper into my ear. Those are the rank 1, 3, 5, 9, and 13 elites. I'm sure you can pick out the rank 1. Millimeters. I nodded subtly, looking toward one particular man. It was like somebody combined Fiden and Vetsman. Tall, but not hulking, yet very obviously stronger than anyone in this room. He carried a long sword on his back and was dressed in slim and masterfully crafted armor. He's Pontek Goliard, the son of a duke, and one of my suitors. You've got a lot of suitors. I'm the daughter of a duchess. In any other circumstance the list would have been tripled and I'd be married by now, likely to the highest bidder. What, you get auctioned off? Not technically, but a marriage happens when a party is willing to offer a more beneficial alliance than all the others. It may as well be an auction. Unfortunately, Pontek comes from a family rather close to mine, as do many of them. And given the fact that we're almost the same age, he was the most viable suitor and likely one of the most hurt by your appearance. Fun. I let out a small sigh, continuing to observe Pontek. Sensing my gaze, he looked over as well, giving me a rather fierce eye. I just smiled and waved as if he were a close friend, causing him to frown and roll his eyes back to the front of the briefing room. Umara squeezed my hand under the table. "Don't worry about it. If he tries anything, you know I'll back you up. We'll just have to wait and see what he tries. Or maybe he'll be a good boy and just keep his paws to himself. Like a dog. I think he's closer to a bear, but yay?" We both chuckled, hanging around a bit more until the commanding officer finally arrived to brief us. "Listen up. One of our forward outposts has been hit with a scourge tide. Right now it's still gathering, but they will need assistance soon. Everyone here is a part of the platoon we're sending out. So gather enough supplies for 3 days. Now, if you take a look at this map, you'll see your entry area in relation to the outpost and tide." The commanding officer went on to give a battle plan. We would be coming in from the eastern side of the outpost, whereas the tide would be coming in from the north. There was a high chance that we would be attacked while trying to enter the outpost, so that was something to be prepared for. "All right, you leave in an hour." Dismissed. As soon as he gave the word, everyone rushed out of the briefing room. Time was tight. The longer we took, the higher the chance of the outpost taking considerable damage. We had to get there before the bulk of the tide hit, and the outpost was, by vehicle, about 3 hours away. We should be getting there right on time. With my squad, I went to the armory to gather some supplies before grabbing a few of my own belongings from my chest before storing everything in one of the several supply trucks going with us. After that we entered a Hummer just for our squad, waiting a bit before our driver arrived and took us away. A dozen armored vehicles rolled through the gates, speeding off into the distance. After that, we waited. I prepared some of my own weapons while the others prepared some of their armor. I chuckled while looking at my Springfield. There was one variation of this rifle that I found. While the one I first grabbed had standard iron sights, another I discovered had a ladder sight. And when I played with it, I found that it could actually zero to a whopping 2,875 yards. I chuckled and showed Demara. "Look at this. This gun is only really accurate to about 300 yards, and yet this sight makes you think you can even aim at something 10 times the distance, let alone hit it. Really makes you wonder what they were thinking when they made it. I guess. I wonder about something else though." "What's that?" "You speak of the people who made those guns like you know them. As far as I know, summons come from other worlds." "Yay?" I went quiet. Surely she wasn't really thinking that I was from another world, right? That would be preposterous, though true. I quickly thought up an excuse. "You know that I get some memories from these weapons, right? There's a lot of knowledge that comes with that. After all, how are you supposed to use something so complex when you don't know what everything on it does?" "That's true." She smiled smugly and left it there, making me feel weird. I looked around, seeing the others watching us as well. Why did it feel like I lost? I suddenly looked back over and put my hand on Umara's head, tilting her back and planting a fat kiss on her mouth from above. She flushed red when I pulled back, making me smile. "Why? You're getting cheekier. Gotta keep you on your toes. Shameless." "Ow." She headbutted my shoulder, hiding her face from the rest of the squad. I just sat there in victory, enjoying the rest of the ride to the battlefront. Chapter 70. You should probably wait to start shooting until we get into the outpost. All right. I nodded at Vetsman's words and relaxed. We were fast approaching the outpost, and I could already feel the scourge tide in the distance. "Prepare for contact," the driver shouted, Umar rising from my embrace and sticking her head out through the top hatch. Since she was a warlock, She could launch ranged spells, ones that didn't produce as much noise as I did. We didn't need to attract more attention than we already would, so for the sake of the entire convoy I refrained. I watched Amara's rolled shift as she waved her arms and cast spells. Recently she had been eager to exercise her magic due to her new enlightenment. She would always come to me with new spells and new ideas, pulling on my knowledge to try and create more devastating magic. We had discussed quite a lot, and although I could only ever inspire her with my knowledge, she was really good at taking it and making something new. Not to mention that she had her mother, who herself contained vast knowledge of all kinds of spells. And she was more equipped than I to help directly, so Amara had more than enough to keep her occupied for months. Now, she could unleash her power without restraint. Sieges were unique in that you didn't have to worry about friendly fire like during other missions working with your squad. It was really a contest to see who could do the most widespread damage. I could hear the explosions from outside the car, including the whistling from Amara's own spells as she launched them into the hordes. This went on for several minutes until at one point, I felt the car roll onto a paved road. "Disembark!" the driver shouted, prompting us all to rush out. I helped Umar down, letting the others go first before the two of us jumped out together. Our CO spoke to another commander as we all grabbed our gear. After a bit of shouting, he turned back to us. "Platoon 8, listen up. All warlocks and ranged fighters, follow Captain Ozen up the walls. All knights, follow me to the gates. Move out. Over here." We were waved over, my squad splitting up as Umara and I followed the captain up the walls. The battle was ongoing. There was no time to waste as we hurried up the stairs. Those of us from the Magisterium, including 2 warlocks from the other elite squad, were kept together and assigned a northeastern position. Our designation was Section 13 of the wall, and there was an officer giving firing commands to all the warlocks in intervals. After all, they couldn't be expected to cast spells continuously for an entire day. Longevity was important. This was a battle of attrition. Section 8. Prepare to fire. The officer shouted not long after we arrived. Umara planted her staff and prepared 6 different spells. I could feel the mana radiate from her body. Since we were up in the walls and there was enough going on, I didn't particularly need any noise cancelling from her. Besides, I wouldn't hamper her excitement anyway by asking her to do something so mundane. I propped my gun up on the wall after setting up my portable seat in front of a crenel. Up above us was a roof protecting our heads, and it did its job well as dozens of volleys of elemental projectiles sailed toward us from within the hordes. I let out a long breath. The siege here was actually bigger than the one that hit Calatrop base, and the most powerful beasts were not mere 35 single quotes. I could spot what seemed like 100 huge beasts. All of them were at least a 35, with some feeling like a 36. And there were others in the midst of the horde that moved with erratic steps, traversing the distance to the walls so fast that I could have sworn they were flying. "Fire!" I heard the shout, and all of the warlocks beside me let loose their spells. Umara's spells kicked up the wind, while other spells radiated heat. Fireballs and spikes of rock all flew into the hordes before us. And Umara's spells weren't meant for attacking, but supporting the spells of others. Fireballs exploded, releasing plumes of fire. And Umara's bolts of air exploded within those fires, expanding them, spreading them and feeding them fuel. The explosions turned into wildfires as they spread across dozens of beasts, scorching their fur and meat, causing the horde to go rabid in pain. A portion of the oncoming tide was stunted as the magical fire burnt some of the weaker beasts to ashes and melted the hides of the stronger ones. Umara was already a 35 herself, and with her enlightenment, she could fight well above her level. and in the crowd of warlocks atop the walls there were some with authority 6 and 7 strength launching devastating area spells. There were thousands of beasts rushing forward, threatening to topple the walls and overrun this outpost. Each spell didn't seem like it did much, as when one died, another simply came to take its place. But nobody here was going to roll over and become monster food. I assumed that this place had defended itself more than once before against tides, so I simply buckled in and did what I could. I targeted anything large and strong. While the memories I received from the Springfield were brief, it was more than enough to understand how to wield this weapon properly. I selected one with a ladder sight, adjusting the 0 to 100 yards before taking aim. After the warlocks fired their spells, I fired my own. Boom. The explosion shook the battlefield as the empowered 30-06 sailed toward a large beast about 200 yards away. The round disappeared into its body, causing it to scream and buckle toward one side. Boom. I fired again, finishing it off on the floor. And right as I pulled the bolt, I heard a shout. "Holy shit! What was that?" "You. It's my weapon," I responded to the officer who came pointing at me. I explained to him that I was a ranged summoner and that my weapons were loud, but effective. After he got over his surprise, he just waved and walked away. So I went back to shooting. Unlike the warlocks, I didn't expend so much energy each time I shot a bullet. I could shoot for hours without rest, even if I didn't always operate at peak strength. Well, I knew myself best, and I was curious to find where my limits lay. During my last siege battle, it took me almost a day to kill over a dozen Authority 5 beasts. And now, I just killed one without breaking a sweat. Seriously, these guns were too good at this. Pulling a portable chair out and getting comfortable, I zoned in and went to town. Crack. Shit. I suddenly ducked as a piece of shrapnel bounced off the wall next to my head. I then felt a hand smack me. "Put on your hood." I know. I smiled at Amara and tapped the band around my neck. Given a second or two, a hood had bloomed over my head and a mask covered my face. Taking a deep breath rejuvenated my body with energy. Shockingly, this mask was even more effective than the last one. Perhaps it had been upgraded a bit when the crystal and enchantments were moved over. Another plus was how the hood didn't narrow my field of view. It almost looked like it wasn't there at all, but I could clearly feel it. I also closed my coat, engaging its fullest protection measures before settling it once more. Bang. My gloved fingers continuously racked the bolt with every round fired. Stripper clips would appear in my hand whenever I went through all the ammo in the internal magazine, making reloads fast and easy. The magazine could only fit 5 rounds, so reloads were frequent. But as I fired more, I became more in tune with the weapon. I developed a rhythm, moving fast but not faster than the gun would allow me. I remembered a saying. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. Rushing something only leads to mistakes, which slows you down even more than if you simply did it properly the first time. Although I treated this weapon a certain way according to the memories I gained, I also noticed how the weapon was rather perfectly made. For one, it wasn't worn and old. In the case of my Remington Lee scope rifle, I had gone through hundreds, potentially thousands of rounds and never oiled nor cleaned it. And when a gun wasn't being taken care of, it would let you know by jamming up. I've personally encountered cases with rifles on Earth where a bolt simply wouldn't move, a clear case of forgetting to oil it up. But I never encountered any of those imperfections. The guns I used all worked perfectly, giving me the most ideal performance they were meant to give. Every pull of the bolt was smooth, every stripper clip slotted in perfectly, every pull of the trigger was crisp, and every bullet looked fresh off the assembly line. Although all summons were from other worlds, perhaps they weren't directly pulled from those worlds. They were spirits, so maybe they were simply embodiments of those weapons, mimicking them. My mind drifted as I sat there for a few hours. Umara was there with me, looking down at me sitting comfortably. I could feel her gaze after the third hour passed. It grew stronger with every passing minute, only drifting when she was called to fire more spells. At some point, I had to zone back out and check on her. "Are you okay?" She stared at me without responding, glancing down at my legs. I looked down with her, seeing nothing particularly out of the ordinary. When I looked back up at her, I sat there and thought for several seconds, wondering what the hell she wanted. Until she finally let out a huff and pulled my arm out of the way, taking a seat in my lap. "Oh. You could have just said something. I'm tired." So am I. Hopefully we won't have to be up here for much longer. I mumbled and shifted our bodies, allowing her to use one of my knees as a chair while still being able to shoot. We were like that for another hour. Whenever she was called on, Umara would just extend her arm and fire a few spells from her palm. Since I didn't move from my little seat, she didn't have to either. Compared to all the other warlocks, we were rather comfortable. Still, as I watched her fire her spells, I got curious. If I was correct, mana circulated through the cardiovascular system in warlocks, meaning that spells were often cast from the body, mostly the palm. However, Umara told me that warlocks with fine control over their aura could use it as a medium as well. This was primarily how they cast multiple spells around their body, like Umara who cast 6 at once earlier. It was like aura was an extension of the body. Wait. I froze a bit. An extension of the body, huh? Knights, who used vigor, being able to extend their vigor beyond their body to attack something at a range. Warlocks, casting spells by extending mana beyond their body, forming spells in the air, allowing them to form more than 1 or 2 at a time. A summoner like myself, who extended psyche beyond the body to trace out formations. All of these things were facilitated by aura. The 3 magical energies, that were normally contained within the body, could be brought beyond it with aura. That meant aura was, almost literally, an extension of body parts. But not physical body parts. The mind. The body. The spirit. Psyche, vigor, and mana. Something clicked for me, causing me to look over at Umara. And, somehow, I reached out and felt her. She turned to me confusedly. I could feel surprise, embarrassment, a tinge of excitement, and stress. When she looked at me, I could feel her curiosity as her aura touched my own, as if they were our hands. She couldn't control hers, like she was fumbling around in the dark. But with me there, she had something to feel for. Before, using aura around other people made it feel like I could do everything short of reading their thoughts. I could feel and read their emotions, even predict their future actions within the next few moments, like I was sensing their subconscious. But now, looking at Umara, I could feel her so much deeper. I could feel her mind directly, her emotions feeding into my own aura, and all of the subconscious thoughts rambling about inside her head. And she could feel me too. She could only read what I gave to her, but she still felt it, like I was inside her brain. We sat there for almost a minute, even disregarding the shout of the officer who commanded us to fire. And, with a thought, I spoke. Not physically, but with my mind. "Can you hear me?" "Yes. Yes." She spoke out loud, but I could pick up her voice within her own mind. My eyes widened. Was this telepathy? Tope continued.